Warm welcome to everybody to this our last session of approaching the Qur'an. Yeah, I may say something about how it went for me at the end. I had promised that I would speak this week about I don't know why you're smiling, can you see what's coming? I had promised that I would speak, that I would spend a good bit of time today talking about traditional conceptions of Akhirah and contrasting them with the more modern, contemporary, more modernist approaches to the Qur'an. Unfortunately, 3-4 things happened. The one is I couldn't get my head around serious intellectual work and so on for a good couple of days. The activist in me around all this Palestine stuff, I've just been kind of overwhelmed, by all the stuff that needed to be done around there. But more importantly, I think the real excuse is that the book that I was going to use as a resource, I, for the life of me, couldn't find the book, and I'm a very last-minute character, so I started searching last night at about 11 o'clock for the book. And until this morning, I couldn't find the book, and when I arrived at my office now, I found the book on my desk. So instead, we'll go through some of the usual stuff that we've been doing, and I'll spend a little bit of time towards the end just giving a synopsis of Akhirah. And how Akhirah is portrayed, other than kind of just in the surahs that we have gathered so far, and perhaps deal with some of the questions about the reality, what kind of reality it is, and then the whole question of permanence, of khulud, of permanence of eternity, permanence of hell, permanence of heaven, and so on. So we will be doing 3 or 4 surahs today, starting off with Surah Al-Alaq, and then Surah Al-Ghashiyah, and then, Surah Al-Alaq, Surah Al-Ghashiyah, and then Surah Al-Zilzal, and then the last surah is that we will do is Surah Al-Qadr. Now, Surah Al-Qadr is the last one. So we're going to start off with Surah Al-Alaq. I'll put it on the screen, which makes it a little bit easier.
Pages?
Right, we'll start with Surah Al-Alaq. Okay, here we go. I should be knowing how to do this now. Here we go.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق. خلق الإنسان من علق. اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم. علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم. كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى. إن إلى ربك الرجعى. أرأيت الذي ينهى عبدا إذا صلى. أرأيت إن كان على الهدى أو أمر التقوى أرأيت إن كذب وتولى ألم يعلم بأن الله يرى كلا لئن لم ينته لنسفعا بالناصية ناصية كاذبة خاطئة فليدع ناديه سندع الزبانية كلا لا تطعه واسجد واقترب
صدق الله العظيم.
جزاك الله خير. I want to draw your attention to, just before we deal with the surah, to some of the points that Michael Sells makes about the sounds of the Qur'an. Funny, I've never seen it in the written text, but I saw it on my on the text on my computer, but I can't ever remember when I read it last night. Or when I read it last night, it was as if it was the very first time that I had come across it. So so let me just find it. It was as if I had come across it for the very, very first time. So that was a bit unusual, a very interesting point that he makes about how rhymes and so on affects the way the Qur'an is received. Thanks for your patience. It doesn't help that this Have any of you ever been to a Shia gathering? If any of you do, when they have silences like this, the speaker or somebody in the audience just says, what did they say? Salawat, you know, and the audience keeps on with salawat and salawat in order to break the...
This is an academic gathering.
What's that? Oh, it's an academic gathering. Okay, thanks, Naeem. You're very helpful. No, I'm looking for where he's actually talking about this American political slogan, something about Dwight Eisenhower. And the book doesn't have a bibliography where he speaks about the rhyming of Ike and Dyke. If any of you can locate it, I'd appreciate it, but I don't remember seeing
Oh,
it.
I got it.
Oh,
It's towards the end,
of?
under the section Hearing the Qur'an,
Towards the end, at the back of the book?
at the back of the book.
Oh.
Yes. It's a section called Hearing the Qur'an.
161.
And that's before sound, spirit, and gender. 161.
161.
Thank you very much. I should have.
No, it's after. Oh no, yes, it's before sound, spirit, and gender.
So it is page?
After endnotes.
Sound. It's after spirit, sound, spirit, and gender, or before that.
Before that. It's after endnotes.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That's not helpful for me.
What page is it?
164.
164.
164.
Can I have your 164, please? Sorry, is that you on Arabic? Okay, here we go. In listening to this surah, I mean, you'll again see how the rhyming has a particular effect on the listener. And Sals does a very good job of explaining some of these sounds. When he says that the point of his own work is not that particular sounds have inherent meaning in themselves, I'm on the top of page 164, but that the Qur'an shapes sounds into particularly powerful combinations with meaning and feeling to create an effect in which sounds and meanings are intertwined. Such combinations are not confined to a single word, such as an interjection like the English aha or oh, or the figure of speech known as onomatopoeia, where the sound of the word of the echoes, where the sound of a word echoes the effect that it signifies, as in the English words to whir. Rather, they cross the boundaries of words. They thereby create a textual harmonics of sound figures with emotional, semantic, and gendered implications. For a preliminary sense of how these sound figures might function in the Qur'an, let us look at a different mode of speech. In the United States presidential race of 1956, the phrase, "I like Ike," became a centerpiece of Dwight Eisenhower's campaign and one of the most successful advertising jingles in history. The linguist Roman Jakobson analyzed the phrase in detail, explaining how its success was only partly due to the rhyming. The meaning of the word like, Jakobson argued, was transferred to Ike in an acoustical way. In an acoustical way that works beyond and beneath the explicit message. In such case, a sound becomes emotive. That is, it takes on the sense of emotion, a certain emotional coloring. Sells goes on, let me emphasize that the sound, in this case, the I, Ike, and like, Ike and like, yes, has no emotional coloring in itself, but takes it on only insofar as it is placed within certain relationships. The positive feelings A picks up are due to the assonance that links the A-I sound in I, like, and I. The center word like contains both the I of I and Ike of Ike. In other words, the sounds of like acoustically embrace the entire 3 words and lend the meaning of like to all 3 words. And the good feelings picked up by the sound of Ike are then transferred to the nickname Ike in a way that works beneath the explicit conscious message and engages the subconscious as well. And then Sells goes on to say, yet there is a skepticism in our culture shown about claims that sound patterns work in subconscious way. The counterproof to such skepticism is found in the billions of dollars spent by advertising agencies to just get the right name for a product and the right sound for a jingle. Any advertising executive can tell you that the slightest alteration in an ad sound pattern can make or break the success of a product. And so in terms of value, use and meaning in people's life, a sacred text and an advertising jingle are at the opposite ends of the spectrum. Yet the text of the Qur'an is made up of features common to all language. If sound patterns at a very basic level have such a powerful effect in the banal context of marketing, imagine the effects of far deeper patterns extended through a sacred text that raises questions about the meaning of life, the source of life, the end of life, and the source of knowledge. And so now Sells is connecting what we know operates in the advertising level and says if the themes themselves deal with these very profound questions that are a part of the fitrah of human beings, that all human beings ask, you can well imagine the impact then that this could have on how we listen to this text. The last few sentences. A vital feature of the Qur'an and one of the reasons for its extraordinary resistance to translation is its underlying sound vision. And then he speaks about how he will concentrate on the particular sound pattern. And so this, I think, is the most beautiful dimension of the Sells work. That in some ways it acknowledges the extraordinary resistance to translation, but he brings forth the underlying sound vision of the Qur'an. Okay, so I want us to listen to this surah again, just bearing in mind what we've just read about this rhyming and how it resonates with us.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم الذي علم بالقلم علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى أن رآه استغنى إن إلى ربك الرجعى أرأيت الذي ينهى عبدا إذا صلى أرأيت إن كان على الهدى أو أمر بالتقوى أرأيت إن كذب وتولى ألم يعلم بأن الله يرى كلا لئن لم ينته لنسفعا بالناصية ناصية كاذبة خاطئة فليدع ناديه سندع الزبانية كلا لا تطعه واسجد واقترب.
Sorry, before I forget, this ayah has a sajda at the end, so please don't forget when you find the earliest convenient moment. Many, as you know, most of the scholars on the Qur'an kind of agree that this was the first 5 ayat of this surah were amongst the first to be revealed. Very interesting that it deals with the use of the pen right in the beginning. Most Muslims have used this ayah to then speak about the importance of knowledge. But I think it's also, I don't know, it's one of the things that I find interesting is that it also refers to that in some ways when you say this is the first ayah and therefore it deals with knowledge, the truth is that it also deals with the written word. And there is a fundamental shift between written discourse and oral discourse. And very many people, certainly in the contemporary world, have challenged the hegemony of the written word over the oral word. And so I think this is a question that gets raised. That the very first ayah in the Qur'an, the use of the pen is emphasized. And the question that people sometimes I raise questions, I don't have answers for them, I just raise them as something to think about. The question that is raised by this is does the Qur'an then right in the beginning affirm the supremacy of the written word over the oral word? What about cultures that doesn't value the written word? Cultures that just have the oral word. African culture, for example, values the oral word. And you tell stories and you tell them the one story gets passed on to the other. Some, I think, kind of very apologetic kind of writings would insist that no, Islam came along for a new phase of civilization, the civilization of the pen, the civilization of writing. But it does, on the surface, appear to be prejudicial to those cultures and so on that privilege the oral word over the written word.
But Farid, doesn't the first word of the first ayah revealed is about the oral? It's recite.
No.
The kalam only comes like verse 4 or 5.
Okay. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. You're right. Yes. So, yes, Ashraf.
That's right. And Prophet was not literate.
Yes.
He isn't illiterate. So it's not about reading written word. He was like ummiyi. وَالَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ.
So it's not necessarily reading. It's not necessarily reading. Okay.
It's verbalizing.
It's verbalizing. It's give voice to. Give voice to. Okay. Thanks, Naim. Thanks, Ashraf. So it's verbalizing. Verbalize the name of your Lord, and this Lord who brought into creation, who created humankind from a clinging substance. And you know, in many other ayat of the Quran where the embryonic processes and the formation of the human being is described in a bit more detail. There's been lots of stuff ranging from Maurice Bucaille's work on science and the Quran to other kind of stuff that seeks to affirm how scientific values are validated in the Quran. And so created humankind from a clinging substance, recite, and your Lord, اقرأ وربك الأكرم, is the most generous. We've dealt with this word generous several times before. And then the use of the pen comes in. But this is also interesting. I'm not sure really what it means. الذي علم بالقلم, that God has taught humankind the use of the pen. I really don't know what this means. Anybody wants to offer an insight into this? علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم, who taught humankind what it did not know. And then كلا إن الإنسان لا يطغى. So again, reminding humankind of the graces and so on that had been bestowed on them by their creation, but lamenting again the condition. And check, you know, how خلق من علق, and then it moves on to أكرم القلم, أكرم and قلم, and then ما لم يعلم, and then the next two يطغى استغنى. كلا إن الإنسان لا يطغى أن رآه استغنى. He sees himself as self-sufficient. And this is one of the ongoing lamentations of the Qur'an about human beings who think that they can make it without their sustainer, who connect their own material welfare, their material success and so on in the world, their achievements, this anania, ana, I am, ranging from the ordinary human being in this case to the extremities of Fir'aun, who goes around saying ana rabbukumul a'la, that I am not only self-sufficient by myself, but I'm also your sustainer. And so this is just a continuing reminder that, look, you can't make it on your own. You're not alone in this. And even if you consider yourself on your own, there are these different kinds of vulnerabilities that you are continuously subjected to, and then the ultimate vulnerability that comes with akhirah. Because he says, Inna ila rabbika ruj'a. Indeed, to your Lord is your return. So you keep on thinking of yourself as filled with istighna, with self-sufficiency, with independence, and so on. But the truth is that at the end of the day, there is some return for you. Then, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يَنْهَى عَبْدًا إِذَا صَلَّى. Have you seen the one who prohibits people from prayer? And you'll see how, thematically speaking, I mean, I don't know for me, but thematically speaking, it's very difficult to say this surah deals with this or this surah deals with that. There's a continuous jumping from the one to the other, which makes a lot of sense in the Celsian way, in the way Michael Sells tries to project it. But in an ordinary literary sense, it's very difficult to find a justification for the switches and from the one topic to the other one if you want to apply ordinary principles of, say, especially structuralist literary works. In post-structuralism, there's a lot more space. Who wants to explain the difference between structuralism and post-structuralism? Ashraf, yes, go for it. Yes.
You have been volunteered.
No.
You understood the point that I was making?
Yeah.
You were listening? No, you understood the point that I was making.
Yeah.
I said that in terms of structuralism, it's very difficult to find an explanation for the Qur'an jumping from one topic to another. And from that perspective, sells these things about rhyming and the impact that it's supposed to reach your other levels of consciousness. That is a much more easier argument to understand. But then I also said that in terms of post-structuralism, in terms of literally post-structuralism, the Qur'an can in fact make literary sense also. So, what is the difference between structuralism and post-structuralism?
From what you say, one can say it's like Qur'an is the old sense of what is literature is like it got a sense, it got a preface and a logical conclusion and a logical end. But there are, for example, in literary theory, there are other traditions, those kind of writers who write without any logical sense in their written sense, but it makes sense when you read. This word, for example, I don't know, Gabriel Garcia Marquez from South America is a Colombian writer, but he writes. If you read the text, you will get a sense. But if you look at for a logical arrangement of chapters and arguments, you will fail to. I don't know.
No, yes. Sorry, your name?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Javed Khan. I'm just visiting, so don't be worried. I'll be leaving soon.
Thanks, Javed, for the promise to leave soon.
After the event, though. I don't know. I was just thinking while he was talking, but could it be to do with, since it is an oral tradition, an oral revelation, and not a written one, that is why it's easier to jump from one thing to another rather than structure it, introduction, development, etc. And therefore, this is how it has been developed in that context, and it is easy. I seem to remember, I think, in Maulana Maududi's tafsir, at the beginning, and when he introduces this, he also says that if you look at it, approach the Quran as a normal book, you will not understand it, you will not get it. But you have to destructure your approach to this book with respect to what you are used to traditionally, and then it becomes alive.
Javed, thanks for coming. But we did actually deal with some of these things in the beginning, and we touched on.
Sorry.
We touched on it, and you're absolutely right. I mean, and this is something that many of us, partly for our affection and so on of the Quran, oh gosh, I mean, we spoke about this in the beginning where people say, I really want to understand the Quran, so I'm learning Arabic in order to understand the Quran. I think it facilitates. Arabic helps you to understand the Quran, but there is understanding at one level. I think Sells wants to introduce us to appreciating the Quran at another kind of level, but yes, it has much to do with the fact that the Quran was revealed inside, and it was an oral community. The word Qur'an itself, two kinds of these things, qarana, to string together, to put together, and qara'a, to read or to proclaim or to recite. Iqbal, is your finger up or your hand up? No.
I'm thinking, is it not the oral word of a written word?
What's that?
Of a written book. If you
No.
take the Quran as inscribed in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, and if you talk of the Akhirah, where everything is going to be presented in written form. So I'm just thinking.
We can't speak about everything
So
being.
I'm saying that the Quran was written
Yes.
and was then orally conveyed. It's just my thinking that's playing around.
It's very difficult. I mean, when you speak about written word, you're speaking about a process, a human process. You're talking about a pen, you're talking about ink, you're talking about papyri or leather skins or bones or paper. You're thinking about material things. And so you can't imagine the way in which, when the Quran, for example, says, وَعِنْدَهُ أُمُّ الْكِتَابِ, that he has, that with him is the mother of the books. You can't imagine a book as we understand it. But certainly us, more than any other generation, us, we are able to to imagine the transition. When you say, I've got an e-book, it has got nothing to do with ink, it has got nothing to do with pen, and yet you can say, I've got an e-book. So what kind of book? It's something that we haven't imagined and possibly cannot imagine. Yes.
I think just going back to the structure and non-structure, for me what comes up is structure is a beginning, a middle and an end. So there's almost like a story to it. And we're so conditioned into understanding things that way. Whereas the non-structure has less to do with a beginning, a middle and an end, and more to do with how we feel about it versus how we think about it. So for me, the Quran is a feeling process versus a thinking process.
I would phrase it, first of all, I appreciate your explanation right until your last sentence. I think that the Quran has significant, very, very significant feeling and emotive dimension to it. And this is an emotive dimension that I try to bring out in this series of lecture, this emotive dimensions to the text. But I would be loath to say that it is this rather than that. because there are also very many ayat of the Quran that kind of pushes, you know, لعلكم تتفكرون لعلكم تتدبرون, to make غور karna Quran, to meditate, to contemplate, to reflect upon it. But again, I mean, it's a very modern post-enlightenment thing where thinking is isolated from the heart, where you divide the head is something and the heart is something. Pre-moderns didn't know this. When you speak, you had to make sense to people and you had to appeal to people. So even this sharp distinction that we make between the cerebral and the emotive, it's very much of a contemporary construction.
Sorry?
Now,
two questions, I'm not sure. One is about the being written before oral. I mean, I'm not clear about the Quranic verse, but my understanding is that the Quran is preserved in the Lawh al-Mahfuz. Okay, preserved doesn't necessarily mean written, right? So my point is, we don't know what Lawh al-Mahfuz means. It could be preserved in an oral way. Okay, in this world, certainly the Quran was oral before it was text. Although I argue in my paper on towards an Islamic feminist hermeneutic that it was always intended to be written, to be text, but it wasn't text until after the death of the Prophet. My second point, Farid, is about the kalam, because when you asked the question, it seemed very curious to me. So the word kalam, which we always translate as pen, of course, and I'm just reading something now, comes from the root kalama, which means to cut or snip or prune a plant, right? To clip or to truncate. A piece of branch twig that was snipped or clipped off is called a kalam. Hence kalam meaning the reed that you write with, right? But if we go back to that first meaning, then perhaps Allah is not saying that I taught by the pen, but that I taught by pruning human beings, by shaping human beings. That's how you were taught, because otherwise you'd be exposed to everything, which is not possible for a human being. And so you know, Allah speaks in the beginning about recite in the name of your Lord who created, and goes on to say, I taught by them, after creating, by pruning, by shaping. And maybe that's what, and if we take that meaning, it's not out of place there.
that's a fascinating explanation, man.
Just in 30 seconds of research,
Yes.
so I'm not,
Yes,
not committing myself to anything.
Yes, yes. But it's people like you, Naeem, who are the bane of the ulama. And then you put them out of business. So while the guy is still going on in front, thinking he's giving all of this, you know, somebody just goes, have you seen this? And then comes up with a much more profound explanation than what the speaker, who is supposed swallowing the Quran, had ever imagined. Anyway, Naeem, you're not coming back next week, hopefully.
I'm taking it with me.
We both leave it together.
Okay, and so here again you have the contrast of the one figure, yanha an salah, and then have you seen the other one, abdan, ara'ayta in kana ala al-huda. In contrast to this person who prevents the abd from salah, ara'ayta in kana ala al-huda, have you seen the other one who is on guidance, or amara bit taqwa, or who enjoins to righteousness. Again, the contrasting that there is between the good and the bad, the contrasting that there is between shar and khayr. And again, a point that I've made repeatedly is very often, you know, we say at some levels it does work. When people say, you know, it's not for us to judge. We can't judge people, we can't. At some levels, at personal levels, at judging the intentions of people, judging the personal actions of people, or their personal religiosity, or the extent of their personal faith, or the absence of their personal faith. At some levels, that is a perfectly valid kind of thing to do. And you say, you know, look, you know, let God judge between people. But at another level, when you take this at a social level, and if you take this at a political level, you don't come along and say, look, God will judge Fir'aun on the day of judgment. It's not for me to judge Fir'aun on the day of judgment. It's not for me to judge Netanyahu in this world. It's not for me to judge Barack Obama in this world. God will judge. These are public acts, these are social acts, these are political acts. So we need to be, it's a balance between passing judgment on the intentions of people, passing judgments on the personal lives of people, and leaving that entirely unto God. And at another level, the Qur'an is filled with condemning and judging the acts of people inside this world, and indeed pushes the believers to take positions and to judge. So here again we find the person who prohibits now.
But to judge people's actions, not to judge people. So you can judge Netanyahu's actions, but you can't judge Netanyahu.
Okay. Thanks. هذا فراق بيني وبينك. This is where I part company with you. But
Shall I take it out now?
no, look, I don't know when you, Javed, I don't know when you got around, but Naeem and I have been getting around for about 30 years. We're not going to let this Pakistani come in here and
destroy this conflict.
No, and we've been parting ways for 30 years.
And we've been parting ways for 30 years, okay? And then again, أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى. Have you seen the one? So here you have the one who is on huda, the one who أَمَرَ بِالتَّقْوَى, and then أَرَأَيْتَ إِنْ كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى. Have you seen the one who rejects, who denies, and turns away? أَلَمْ يَعْلَمْ بِأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَرَى. Does he not know that God sees, that God is, that watches? And then كَلَّا, no, if he does not desist, we shall drag him by the forelock. Difficult to say how I'm going to be dragged by my forelock. ناصية كاذبة خاطئة فليدع ناديه الزبانية. And then the last one, كلا لا تطع واسجد واقترب. No, don't follow them. Instead, اسجدوا واقترب, and draw closer to God. So this continuous contrast we find in this surah. We move on to the next surah, which is Surah Al-Ghashiyah.
Sorry, can I just...
Yes.
The summary on the surah, I sort of read somewhere that it starts with knowledge, and knowledge needs to, in isolation, knowledge is no good. It needs to, with wisdom, it needs to action. And the action in this surah, the end, is to come closer to Allah. So it starts with Iqra, but it tells you where to go to and draw closer to Allah.
It's wonderful how the class is warming up only on the last day.
It's a diesel engine, it takes time to start up.
Yes, but the only problem is that the diesel engine has really reached the destination. And who knows, this may be the beginning where people take the Qur'an a bit more seriously than what they took the Qur'an, and so yes, it may still go on, inshallah. Okay. فلتفضل سورة الغاشية من فضلك.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع وجوه يومئذ ناعمة لسعيها راضية في جنة عالية لا تسمع فيها لاغية فيها عين جارية فيها سرر مرفوعة وأكواب موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذبه الله العذاب الأكبر إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم.
I don't have anything to say about this surah. Not that I haven't read it, not that I haven't prepared the surah. Would any of you like to say something about the surah? The last lines were the most poignant for me. A simple "Inna ilayna iyabahum, thumma inna alayna hisabahum." That to us is their return, and then upon us is their account. Any of you want to add anything? Not add anything? Want to say something about this? No. No. Okay. I want to move on to Surah Az-Zilzal, and then I want to speak a little bit about Akhirah. And then I want us to read, then I want to move on to Surah Al-Qadr. Iqbal, did we copy? Oh, we did have Surah. Okay.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره.
The big thing about this surah is what Sells calls the inverse of the cosmic apocalypse. Most of the other ayah that deals with Akhirah or the commencement of Akhirah deals with the heavens and the skies and the clouds and sometimes the mountains. But this ayah is the inverse of many of those, in that it is what he calls a chthonic apocalypse. That it is an apocalypse that emerges from inside the earth. So I draw your attention to page 109. As opposed to the cosmic apocalypse, in which the sky is ripped apart, the quaking, az-zalzala or az-zilzal, represents what might be called a chthonic apocalypse, with the earth opening up to yield her secrets. The bearing forth of these secrets is conveyed through a birth metaphor. When the earth bears forth, وَإِذَا وَأَخْرَجَتِ الْأَرْضُ أَثْقَالَهَا, when the earth brings forth its burdens. She bears them forth, sorry, he also says, with the earth in the feminine gender, governing a series of feminine grammatical constructions throughout the ayah. She bears them forth, or as how the Arabic construction here is tantalizingly elusive, her Lord revealed to her. وأخرج الأرض أثقالها بأن ربك أوحى لها. Where is that? Anyway, I think I used يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها. On that day, when it will report, when it will reveal, when it will inform that which its Lord had, or her Lord had revealed to her. The implied metaphor and partial personification resonates powerfully with the metaphor of creation, in which the deity breathes into Adam the spirit of life. This وَنَفَخَ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِهِ, and he blew of his ruh, which is feminine, into it. So in this case, where the deity breathes into Adam the spirit of life, Muhammad's prophecy, where the spirit in a subtle undertone is depicted as inseminating the night of destiny, which is partially personified as female, Layla, and the conception of the prophet Jesus within Mary through the activity of the spirit. Thus the implied personification and sound figures that strengthen them bring together the three primordial moments of the Qur'an: creation, prophecy, and the day of reckoning. And we've seen this in Surah Alaq also in a different way. So these three elements, the three major landmarks of destiny, of existence, creation, prophecy, and the day of reckoning, are then conveyed in undertones and intimations of an eternal moment in which the three moments fall into one another. The ontological inversal here is most explicit, as the earth itself is shattered and gives forth its final secret. Human beings will come forth in scattered groups to encounter what they have been and truly are. Whatever has done a mote's weight good will see it. That is, the person will see it in all its momentous finality. The act might have seemed small at the time. Similarly, whoever has done a mote's wrong, an act of injustice or neglect that might have seemed insignificant at the time, will see it in its ultimacy. As with many of the shortest surahs concerning the day of reckoning, the recognition of what has been done, of good and evil, a recognition occurring at a moment when nothing can be changed, evaded, or rewritten, is the core of reckoning. Can we just listen to the surah one more time, bearing in mind the insights that Sals has provided for us? نفس السورة من فضلك.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره.
But just before I forget, people, a point, there is a mailing list circulating. If your name is not on the UJ's mailing list, we don't send out junk mail. We would really like to have your name on the mailing list. Is it circular? Does anybody need it? No? Iqbal, if you can just send it to the front, please. Okay? Whenever I read this surah, I think of a particular experience that I had. It was in Indonesia a couple of years ago, and it was shortly after Fajr, when it was, I mean, I don't think any of you have ever lived through an earthquake or a serious earthquake, and I just heard this deep, deep rumbling coming, you know, from somewhere deep underground, and it was a frightening rumbling, and I screamed to my roommate to wake up, you know. I screamed and I said that this is an earthquake, and I felt the rumblings before the quaking of the earth. I felt the rumblings, I heard the rumblings. And when I rushed to the door of the hotel room, I couldn't really open the door properly because the place was shaking. So I couldn't open the door, and then I kicked the door open. And of course it was an earthquake. I mean, much of the hotel building had come down. I don't want to talk about the earthquake now, although I may want to share an insight or two about earthquakes. But what was very, very moving that night for Salatul Maghrib, now, I mean, some of you have been to Indonesia. Well, certainly for me, there isn't another place in the world where I feel as happy to be a Muslim as I am in Indonesia. Indonesia just brings out the best in me. It puts an end to all my ugly habits, my terrible ways of speaking to people, my coarse and abruptness and so on. It just puts an end to all of this. I'm just the nicest person that I can possibly be whenever I'm in Indonesia. Brings out the best in me. Anyway, so I was in the mosque for Maghrib, and then the Imam started reading this surah. And while he was starting to read the surah, there was an aftershock. And so it is quite an experience to be experiencing an aftershock immediately after an earthquake in the middle of while this surah is being read. So whenever I listen to the surah, I think about these deep rumblings inside the earth. But two little insights about earthquakes. When I was a child, I often thought that when people die in earthquakes, it's as if the ground has opened up and then they fell into it. This was my imagination as a child. Later on, of course, we learned that that it is the destruction of buildings and people die as a result of collapsing buildings and so on. And then we described this as an act of God, or I mean in insurance, you know, it's also described in insurance as an act of God. But the truth is, if you have an earthquake, for example, say measuring 6.8 on the Richter scale, that is a fairly intense kind of earthquake. If such an earthquake were to hit San Francisco or to hit Japan, nobody will die in it. Simply because the wealth in these places enables people to build earthquake-proof buildings and so on. So, and in the poorer countries, you could have an earthquake much lower on the Richter scale, and you would have devastation on a much larger scale. A few thousand people had died in this earthquake inside Indonesia. Paul Nitter, a very famous liberation theologian, he has a picture of me standing outside the hotel in my shorts, and one of these treatment action campaign t-shirts, HIV positive, with a little bag in my hand or something, t-shirt standing all stranded on the street. And I remember very clearly one of the things that I had, you know, by the way, it was also the time of a tsunami, so people were fleeing from the earthquake. Oh, there were three things happening at the same time. People were fearing a tsunami coming from the sea, and they were running up, but they were also running up in the direction of Mount Merapi, which is an alive volcano that had spewed ashes, that had been spewing ashes for days and days, and it was only a matter of another day or two before the volcano actually erupted.
Which is why you had the earthquake.
Which is why you know the earth, yeah, which is why you had the earthquake. And so people were running from the sea, because they had a tsunami before that. They were running from the sea in the direction of Mount Merapi, and Mount Merapi itself was about to explode. And I remember a very clear thought that I had, that here I was, standing outside this hotel, but I had my passport with me, a South African passport, and I had my credit cards with me. And I remember the smug sense of satisfaction that came from the fact that if the Red Cross, if whatever, you know, I will be privileged with my foreigner status, that I will be privileged with my credit cards. And so even in the midst of this act of God, there are concrete economic forces that somehow cushion some of us from experiencing the act of God fully, and exposes others to the act of God completely. Which of course raises questions about not the acts of God, but the inadequacies in our approaches to all of these things, when we don't take sufficient cognizance of how socio-economic factors, poverty, justice and injustice really shapes all of this. And so, you know, it's bitterly cold, or it's a storm, or it's a flood. We don't have to do anything. You just get into your house, you're okay. And for other people in other parts of the country, and we think it's like another world, you know, meanwhile it is just there in Quatema. Meanwhile it is just there, you know, on the edge of Alex. This act of God means homelessness. This act of God means death. So that was on a more serious note. This on a lighter note, also relating to earthquakes. You've seen sometimes these images of where the whole village is flattened and only the mosque has remained behind. Have you seen these images in an earthquake or something like that? And Muslims send these pictures off to other people. They kind of, you forward it to all your friends and so on, and they say, you know, this is, you know, it just shows the greatness of Islam or the miracle of Islam or something. Nothing to do with that, people. Very simple logic. In many parts of the two-third world, there's a lot of corruption on a daily basis with construction. So you don't have your, you know, you pay off your building inspector, you don't have your proper cement, water, sand combination. And so, but when it comes to building a mosque, Khuda said, they are afraid of God. Yattaqillah. They are afraid of God when it comes to building a mosque. So there's no bribery, there's no corruption, there's proper these things, because this is the house of God that we are building. And so, of course, you see destruction all around because there was corruption, illegal building, you paid off the inspector and so on, but you didn't want to pay the inspector off when it comes to... So this is the explanation. So in future, please don't forward these images of the mosque as a miracle of God. It's simply a function of how economics and social stuff works with people.
It makes sense why some of the mosques did
What's
collapse.
that?
It makes sense why some of the mosques did collapse.
Oh! But I never come to terms with your cynicism. Like Naeem, I've also known you for far longer than what I would want to be reminded. Okay.
Sorry, the additional,
No.
related to the same theme on that non-destructible masjid. The additional thing, apart from the bribery and all of that, is that in many of these towns and villages, especially villages, and I've also seen pictures of the church standing while everything else has been destroyed, that people actually give far more of their resources into building their religious sites than they do for their own homes. And so when you look at the destruction around, the houses are often made of things like reed and whatever. But the masjid or the church is actually built of brick and mortar. It's a good indication of how people value their religious thing. But and also, of course, that often they're able to do that because the money comes from Saudi Arabia or the Vatican or whatever the case might be.
Yes. But Naeem, I agree with you. I agree with you. But on another note, Naeem, one thing that I can't figure out for the life of me, I can't figure out. Why do, and it's not Christians, it's really a very Muslim thing. I, for the life of me, can't figure out why do the Muslims, they look after their mosques and they value their mosques more than what they value their homes in general. Why are the toilets an exception throughout the Muslim world? Why are the toilets an exception? I think you know what I'm trying to say. Gosh, man, you always have...
In Turkey, when I traveled, I knew I really needed to go. You gotta find a mosque because that was the only place that had water and a clean toilet.
That had water and?
Water and a clean toilet.
Water and a clean toilet.
Yeah, the other places you use it.
Yeah, but...
The mosques, funny enough, they always have clean water and a clean toilet.
Alhamdulillah. Turkey saves
And that
our
was even in
bacon.
some of the villages.
No pun intended.
That was actually in some of the villages.
Okay, in some of the villages.
Yeah.
But even some of the more well-traveled people will know, the Grand Mosque in Paris. Is there nobody who cleans the toilets? Okay, well, people are doing an increasingly better job, I think, over the years, no?
I don't go to mosque toilets.
Well, Naeem, you should check up. You are responsible for one of them at least. So don't cop out. I don't go to mosque toilets. And if you know, it is just for these ammatun nas, locals. No, I don't go to mosque toilets. We do Surah Al-Qadr, and then that's going to be our last surah. Just before we do Surah Al-Qadr, people, I wanted to, we're running out of time, but I did want to just make a couple of comments on the question of Akhirah before we come to Surah Al-Qadr. So basically, people, most of the shorter Meccan surahs, to summarize, they talk about, they deal with the ethical and the human accountability on a day to come. And this day to come is described in different ways in the Qur'an. It is described as the day of Akhirah. It is as the day to come, the next. It is described as the day of accountability, of accounting, Yawm al-Hisab, Yawm al-Muhit, a day that encompasses everything, Qiyamah, the standing up, the resurrection, the Ba'ath, also the resurrection, Yawm al-Jam', the day of gathering, and Yawm al-Liqa', the day of meeting. The encounter, your meeting with yourself, your meeting with your deeds, your meeting with your history, and of course your meeting with your sustainer. There's now I may come a little bit later to the nature of akhirah, but when this came early on, I told you that every generation of Muslims have always spoken as if they were living through what is known as Akhir al-Zaman, the last period. The Prophet himself was asked, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ, they ask you about the hour, and then say that only God knows when this hour is supposed to come. So the Islamic sense of the world, then there is a dunya, a realm of action, and there is an akhirah, a realm of recompense, a realm of jaza. So it's also known as Yawmul Jaza, the day of recompense. A clear theme of reward and punishment, and this punishment, the most common word for it is adab. It is sometimes described as this great punishment, the shadid, a severe punishment, a muqim, a permanent punishment, and it affects all of the senses of human beings in different kind of ways that we've seen in just the previous surah that we have read. Now, a comprehension of what is actually lying ahead. Of course, in hadith literature especially, the imagery of the year after is very, very graphic. But in one of the surahs that we just read, Surah Al-Ghashiyah that we just read, you could also see fairly graphic images even of both punishment and of hell. Are these words to convey to human beings a sense of kind of all analogies, or is this real? I don't know. I'm not giving an opinion on it, and there are diverse opinions on it. But the Quran does speak about يَوْمَ تُبَدِّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ, that when the earth gets turned into non-earth, that when the earth gets turned into non-earth, the Quran speaks about having prepared for people things that their senses aren't able to comprehend. It's a day when our senses, our skins will testify against us. There is the whole, we've seen this, of Jahannam, and the idea of permanence connected to it. And there's been long discussions on whether people go to Jahannam permanently or not. There are two words that the Quran uses, the one more than the other, the term khulud, which generally indicates permanency. And in some other texts, khulud also means for a long time. There's an interesting ayah that doesn't come, that I don't remember immediately, but the word Khalid or khulud, one of the derivations of khulud, is used both in relation to the believers as well as in relation to the kuffar. And then, I mean, this is, really something which I find very, very uncomfortable, is how the Mufassirun just insert, sometimes very arbitrarily, words into the text that completely gives it a different spin. The most famous of this is this La ikraha fi din, that there is no compulsion in religion. Bas, that's what the Quran says. And then the Mufassirun come along and say, La ikraha fi dukhul ad-din, that there is no compulsion into entering the religion. But once you're in it, you jolly well have to stay in it. If you don't stay in it, 3 days we chop off your head. You know? So this kind of insertion that radically changes the meaning of the text. So in some ways, this khalidina fiha is one of those. So khulud. Do you stay in this Jahannam forever or not? There's one ayah, and I'm really sorry that I didn't come with the exact reference, that speaks about the kuffar and khalidina fiha. And then nearly all the mufassirs, nearly all the tafsirs that I've looked at will say that here it means khalidina fiha abada, that they will abide in there forever and ever. Khalidina fiha abada. Now abada is also used in the Quran to emphasize khalidin. And then in the same text, there is a reference to the Muslims, or to some Muslims, also going to Jahannam, who were impious. And it also says, خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا. The same word, they will abide therein forever. And then all the mufassir, all the tafsirs that I've looked at will say, in this case, Khalidin means a limited period. The same word. When it comes to the others, then Khalidina means forever and ever. When it comes to us, it means for a limited period. So there is this whole idea that it is forever, and then of course, because we are God's chosen people, and I'm saying this with some sarcasm, in our case, it doesn't mean forever. So does Jahannam and Jannah persist forever? There is this thing that forever and ever, in the really eternal sense of the word, this is something that you can really only apply to God. This eternity, in the absolute sense of the word, it's not a term that you can apply to anything with the same kind of certainty and with exactly the same kind of meaning that you would apply to God. Other people who argue that that it isn't forever refer to an ayah in the Qur'an. So the one ayah is the one ayah that they refer to is كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. That everything in the cosmos is fan, it is perishable, it will end. ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. And the only thing that will remain is the countenance of your Rabb, Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, the possessor of Jalal, of power. It's not the best word, but Jalal, Dhul Jalali wal Ikram, and of dignity. And then there is another rider in another ayah of the Quran, where in the Quran says خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا إِلَّا مَا شَاءَ رَبُّكَ, that they will abide in there forever, except مَا شَاءَ رَبُّكَ, except as your sustainer has determined. And then in one of the earlier surahs that we have read, إن جهنم كانت مرصادا للطاغون مآبا لابثون فيها أحقابا. Here the word أحقابا is used, which indicates a period, a limited period. So those are just some kind of little things that I wanted to share about Akhirah with you before we listen to the last surah and then have a series of longish announcements to make. The last surah is the surah that deals with Laylatul Qadr, that some year may have celebrated a week ago, and others did last night or the night before, and others have been doing for the last 7-8 nights already on the unequal night, and will continue to do it tonight. We'll continue to do it tonight. And Naeem wants to, huwa atqa minna. Naeem is the more aware amongst us of these things. That's probably because he runs a mosque. Is it because you...
I don't, by the way, but it's
okay.
He runs from the mosque.
See, that's the kind of tafsir I was talking about. Add one word in and change the meaning.
Right. But you can also see, Naeem, why I want to run from him all the time. فلتفضل سورة القدر.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر.
I would just, I'm not going to say anything about this surah. I want to just conclude the formal part of our work right here, and then move on to a few other things. Perhaps I do want to say something about this surah. No, I just kind of felt that I shouldn't have the last word. Let the last word be the Qur'an's word, you know. Lots of different interpretations. I mean, you know the two basic meanings of Qadr, the night of power, others say the night of destiny, and then the night of destiny conflicts a bit with the Islamic theological things of Laylatul Bara'ah, because that is Shabi Bara, that is generally the night that is seen as the night where of decree, where Qada and Qadr, you know, where that gets dealt with. What does it mean? خير من ألف شهر, better than 1,000 months. What is a month? Is it a mathematical calculation? Is it just giving us a sense of the power of this night? What does it mean when Laylatul Qadr is on this possible night and on this possible night? What does it mean that that some of our families had Laylatul Qadr 2 days before the time, say in the United States, than what we had it here? What is the night? These are some of the issues around this. Was the Quran revealed in its entirety on this particular night? Was this the night of the first revelation? Was this the night when the Quran was revealed in its entirety from the Lawh al-Mahfuz, conveyed to Jibreel, who then came in piecemeal by piecemeal? Lots of different discussions around this. Other than the certainty that the Quran, or the beginnings of the Quran, also commenced on the night of Laylatul Qadr. Most of you were probably in a mosque on one of your Laylatul Qadrs. Most of you probably heard the talks and so on, and so there's little, I mean, yeah, there's not much that I want to add to all of these discussions. Now,
I just want to make one comment on the surah of Laylatul Qadr.
ارفع صوتك.
I just want to make one comment on Laylatul Qadr. In hadith literature and stuff, there is quite a repetitive narrative about Prophet ﷺ leaving to inform people of the specific of this night. And then he encounters two Muslims who are having a quarrel. And he goes on to say that the exact night that knowledge thereof is taken away from the Prophet ﷺ. And I just have a thought to share on this, because we live in a time when Muslims are not just quarreling with one another, we're killing one another. And then we go into these masjids thinking we're seeking Laylatul Qadr. And the thought goes through my mind that if this is our behavior, we could pretty much be dreaming about Laylatul Qadr. We're never going to reach it. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you very much.
Very, very
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. We're going to be here for another 10 minutes or so, but I would like to conclude this part of the program by saying that it was very challenging for me because generally I don't put my own faith stuff on the line. I don't put my own faith in what I believe and what I don't believe, what I like and what I don't like. I don't put those kind of things out in a university context. I may put those things out in another context, certainly never in a classroom context, never at a university context. So I felt a bit uncomfortable about all of this. So I felt a little bit, so it was a bit challenging for me. It was also challenging in the light of many other things that emerged suddenly and drew, you know, my and several of your attention as activists in the struggle for the liberation of Palestine and injustice against the injustices being committed against the Palestinian people. It's the first time that I did a series of lectures at UJ, and it's only the it's only it's only the third time that I've actually given a public lecture at UJ. The one is my own inaugural lecture, and the other one was something on approaches to the Qur'an or something like that. So it's, I mean, I'm not quite sure why I kind of reticent or hesitant and so on to do these kinds of things. But I certainly enjoyed it, and I hope that it added some kind of value to your Ramadan. So for the camera purposes, I want to say thank you very much for coming. Naeem and does anybody have an extra copy of it? Yeah. Okay. Is there anybody who doesn't have a copy of it? Okay. The translation is at the back. تفضل.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم اللهم ارزقنا بكل حرف من القرآن حلاوة وبكل جزء من القرآن جزاء اللهم ارزقنا بالألف ألفة وبالباء بركة وبالتاء توبة وبالثاء ثوابا وبالجيم جمالا وبالحاء حكمة وبالخاء خيرا وبالدال دليلا وبالذال ذكاء وبالراء رحمة وبالزاء زكاة وبالسين سعادة وبالشين شفاء وبالصاد صدقا وبالضاد ضياء وبالطاء طراوة وبالظاء ظفرا وبالعين علما وبالغين غنى وبالفاء فلاحا وبالقاف قربة وبالكاف كرامة وباللام لطفا وبالميم موعظة وبالنون نورا وبالواو وصلة وبالهاء هداية وبالياء يقينا اللهم انفعنا بالقرآن العظيم وارزقنا بالآيات والذكر الحكيم وارفعنا بالآيات والذكر الحكيم وتقبل منا قراءتنا وتجاوز عنا ما كان في تلاوة القرآن ومن خطأ أو نسيان أو تحريف كلمة عن مواضعها أو تقديم أو تأخير أو زيادة أو نقصان أو تأويل على غير ما أنزلته عليه أو ريب أو شك أو سهو أو سوء الإلحان أو تعجيل عند تلاوة القرآن أو كسل أو سرعة أو زيغ لسان أو وقف بغير وقوف أو إدغام بغير مدغم أو إظهار بغير بيان أو مد أو تشديد أو همزة أو جزم أو إعراب بغير ما كتبه أو قلة رغبة ورهبة عند آية الرحمة وآيات العذاب واغفر لنا ربنا واكتبنا مع الشاهدين اللهم نور قلوبنا بالقرآن وزين أخلاقنا بالقرآن ونجنا من النار بالقرآن وادخلنا في الجنة بالقرآن اللهم اجعل القرآن لنا في الدنيا قرينا وفي القبر مونسا وعلى الصراط نورا وفي الجنة رفيقا ومن النار سترا وحجابا وإلى الخيرات كلها دليلا فاكتبنا على التمام وارزقنا آداء بالقلب واللسان وحب الخير والسعادة والبشارة من الإيمان وصلى الله تعالى على خلقه وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد مظهر اللطف ونور عرشه سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين وسلم تسليما كثيرا اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وانصر دين الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم وانصر إخواننا في فلسطين وفي العراق وفي مصر وفي سوريا يا رب العالمين اللهم رد المسجد الأقصى إلى رحاب المسلمين اللهم رد المسجد الأقصى إلى أيدي المسلمين بفضلك وبجودك وبكرمك يا أكرم الأكرمين وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين الحمد لله.
Jazakallah khair. Just a word of thanks before we get cut off and I make some announcements. People, we often come, and of course sometimes you see, the bit of disorganization and so on, like with can't find my Icon Dyke and Eisenhower in cells. But generally, I can like, sorry, I can like, yes. And there we go, the disorganization that I was speaking about. But on the whole, alhamdulillah, it went very well, and it goes well in large part because of a whole lot of things that happens behind the scenes. I don't see Jamil here at the moment, but Jamil does a huge amount of running around before, from getting the chairs to removing these tables that some of you are seeing today but haven't seen for 3 weeks, removing them and so on, setting the room up, resetting the room back. There has been Ashraf, Iqbal, I don't see Alex here. There is Ashraf, Aslam, Rafi. People who've been doing a lot of work, Nadine behind the scenes, sending out, arranging the publicity and so on. Hannes, who has been doing the recording for us. Thank you very, very much, Hannes, for your own willingness to be here. Our Qari has been a wonderful companion for all of us and has helped us to journey through the shorter Meccan surahs in a very, very pleasant and a pleasing, in a very pleasant and a pleasing way. So we are deeply grateful, Hadratak, for your presence and your contribution. Yeah. And of course, to all of you, thank you very much for coming. And as ever, often something I like about many, many African Americans, when you ask people how they are and it's going well with them, they will say, I'm blessed. It's not just I'm okay or I'm well, they will say I'm blessed. And so, yeah, I want to say, my own gratitude I want to express to the one who has blessed me. So, Jazakallah khair, thank you very much for coming. Hannes, Dr. Munshi, I'd forgotten you. Yes.
I think I can say on behalf of everybody, we'd like to thank Farid for this wonderful series of talks. And I think testimony to that thanks is the fact that you have a good house for all your time. And just to make 1 or 2 comments, as Shamim had said, Farid can say things and he can get away with it. But the better one was said by Shanaz when she says, that Professor Farid, even when he speaks English, he speaks with tajweed. So we'd like to thank you for the cause, and we've gained and benefited a lot from it. And I think perhaps it would be said for it to come to an end, that perhaps we could have it once a month, one evening or something, whatever people can discuss and sort of talk about and get together. And I think we should continue this series. Before I sit down, I'd like to thank Sheikh Hadi Suleiman as well for really enriching the experience.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much.